Greetings! For today's video, I'm very excited to feature something new and relatively different. Have you heard of the Shinhan PASS Color paints? They are a very unique type of paint that is a hybrid of gouache and watercolor. It is the only professional product of this sort in the world. The idea of these paints is that by controlling the amount of water you mix in, you can get varying results. More water will give you transparency like with watercolors, and less water will leave the paint more opaque like a gouache. I'm very curious about this concept and eager to paint with these paints. These paints are crafted by Shinhan and they were introduced in 2015, so they are quite new. The range offers 48 colors at the moment, and you can buy it both in single tubes of 20 ml or in sets. I really like that they offer a 48 color set so that you can opt for that and will have all the colors in the product range. The paint is certified non-toxic. All the pigment information is readily available, both with the brochure or on the tubes. You can find all of Shinhan's brochures on their website. A small bit of history on Shinhan. They are a Korean company that has been crafting paints since they were established in 1967. Their headquarters is in Seoul, Korea. They started by making poster color paints, but slowly added more types of paint and other art supplies to their products. They are focused on crafting the best quality paint possible. For me, locally, their paints have not been available for long. My local stores have the professional watercolors and poster paints. I wanted to take a moment to talk about the brand because they are fairly new to me, and unlike Winsor & Newton or Daniel Smith, some of us might not have heard of Shinhan before. The colors I have are burnt sienna, permanent red, permanent yellow, sap green, cerulean blue hue, and permanent violet. The tubes are made of plastic and easy to open. The only downside to these paints would be the general light fastness of the product range. According to the brochure I have, Shinhan rates these PASS Color paints with stars, 4 stars being their highest degree of light fastness and 1 star being a low degree of light fastness. Only 3 colors from the range have 4 stars. 13 colors have 3 stars, 24 have 2 stars, and 8 colors have 1 star. In that regard, these paints are closer to gouache and designer paints for the conservation aspect. It would be best to scan and keep a pristine copy as a digital file, and take the necessary protective measures if you want to hang original art on your walls. I decided to combine my swatches and a small chart to figure out how these colors look and mix together. I was able to get a very natural range of colors from the 6 tubes that I have. I wanted to do some more tests, so I picked up another sheet of paper and kept on going. When laid down more like watercolor, the colors layer very nicely. My top layers didn't move the bottom layer too much, unless I would paint over it repeatedly. In that regard, it behaves exactly like what I'd expect from watercolors. I also made some very opaque swatches, and these behaved like gouache, in the sense that it was easier to move a dry color. If you look at the watered down series of lines I made, I had no problem overlapping lines perpendicular to them. The purple and green lines lay there on top and didn't affect the colors underneath. When I scrubbed at the lines with a very watery wash, I was able to move some of the color. If you look at the more opaque swatches, the overlapping yellow lines picked up a lot more color, because there was a lot more there for the brush to pick up. I was able to pick some of the pigment up, but they all stained the paper rather well in this case, so I wouldn't plan around being able to lift the color off the paper when painting. I set out to paint a landscape to try these paints. On purpose, I had let my palette dry out for a couple of days. I wanted to see how these paints dry and if I can re-wet them easily. Some dried out but stuck well to their spot. Some were a bit more cracked and I could pick them up like dry little paint cakes. Nothing had flaked off though, which is something that can happen with cheap watercolors and gouache. I added some distilled water to the dry paint and let it sit for a minute or two while I prepare everything else. The first thing I noticed here is how well these re-wet. I was surprised. They did even better than some of my professional watercolor paints. The dried, cakey bits reconstituted perfectly, without being crumbly or too hard. All my pre-made mixes also came back to life as if they had never dried. With any medium that can be reactivated, I like to work from light to dark. I applied a base color wash and built on top of it, letting each layer dry completely before adding another one on top. The second thing that was surprising to me is how easily I could mix rich, deep, dark colors. Shinhan say they use the best refined pigments and purified gum arabic to produce highly saturated colors, and seeing this, I believe them. Painting from light to dark, I had no issue with lifting colors where I didn't want to, and I was able to build a strong color very quickly. As long as you're not trying to make a color lighter, you can really pile on the paint and it takes it really well. The colors are indeed very vibrant, more so than what I'm used to, and I really love it. I was happy with my first demo, but I wanted to play some more with these paints, so I prepared a second sketch and painted it. This time using colors I had not used a lot in the first painting. Again, the colors worked really well, from washes to more opaque applications. Even watered down, these colors never look washed out. They have a unique strength that I find fascinating. When I decided to try out these paints, I was really curious to know how the hybrid factor would play in. I love that gouache is intense and opaque, but it is also difficult to work and doesn't keep well in a palette. Watercolor, on the other hand, rewets generally better in a palette, but it is harder to get strong, dark, and vivid colors without laying down a lot of layers. Shinhan PASS Color paints really deliver the best of both of these worlds. I went in without expectations, but I'm impressed by these colors. I would recommend trying these out. If you're really unsure, start with one tube. Jackson's sells these paints and most of the colors are around $4 per tube, which is less than a fancy coffee. I'm not trying to be an enabler, but these are pretty awesome, so if you can, give them a try. And let me know how you like them in the comments below. Thanks for watching, take care, bye bye!